Hi, and thank you for joining us today on the road to recovery. My name is Ronda Jackson, your host, serial entrepreneur and small business advocate. And our guest today is Miss Wendy Gladney, life strategist of the Season of Greatness. Welcome, Wendy. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
Well, thank you. So will you tell us a little bit about Season of Greatness for the guests that don't know about you and your show?
Sure. So Season of Greatness was initiated basically out of one of my own life lessons. And it was developed to help women find their best selves and to understand that we as women have different seasons in our life. And what may have been important at one point can also sometimes, lose its traction later, but how every season of our lives, we have greatness.
I like that. I think I've heard that before. A season or a reason, right? That's why people are in our life.
Or a lifetime.
Yeah, for a lifetime. So I like to start the show by asking the guests for one word that they would use to describe the season or the time that we're in. What would your word be?
Reimagined.
Oh, I like that. Will you say a little more? Why reimagine?
Yeah, reimagine. Would you like me to elaborate on it a little bit more? Okay. So when I think of the word reimagine, it's about right now with COVID-19 and the Black Lives Matter movement and even the electoral process that we're all going through. Can you just reimagine what you would really want your life to look like, what you would want the world to look like? And then what can you do to make that happen? So reimagine is my word.
I like that. And I like that you didn't paint it as a fantasy or something that was impossible. You packaged it in a way that your new reality is what I hear.
Yeah, because right now we're hearing a lot about pivoting or shifting or, all these different words as relates to what people are having to do because some people are either losing their jobs, they have loved ones that they've lost, and they're having to, shift or pivot. But also, I try to make people think about what about imagining what you would want your life to look like or the world to look like, and then stop and think about what can you do to make that happen. So that's where reimagine would come from.
Well, that is so apropos because today's discussion, one of the reasons why I selected you as a guest is because you are very much into mindset and whole self. And as emerging and established entrepreneurs, we pour ourselves into our business, we pour ourselves into our work, and that product of that is what usually defines us. So I know that a lot of us are really traumatized, I guess, if I'll use I can't think of a better word right now, but we're really attached to what we look like on the outside. So I really wanted to have a question and answer session with you about COVID, civil unrest, and what that impact is on entrepreneurs and what your recommendations would be for us to kind of stay on the road to recovery. So here we are.
I like that. That's really beautiful. Thank you. Can I make a comment on something you just shared?
Please.
Okay.
Share.
When you were talking about how so many times we're so interested in what we look like on the outside, one of my very first books that I wrote was called Healing Without Hate, How to Forgive to Live. And it dealt with, on the cover was a beautifully packaged gift with a big, beautiful bow. But inside was a teacup made of china and the box had been thrown. And so inside the teacup was broken. But on the outside, you couldn't tell that, because it was such a beautifully wrapped gift. Well, what I talk about often is sometimes until you really get to know someone, you don't know how broken they may be on the inside. And on the outside, they've tried to put so much emphasis on the external when we need to look at the internal.
Internal, and also the internal in our operations and how our modus operandi for our lives. So then how would you recommend a person, so entrepreneur, emerging or established, do that internal assessment? Where should they start with that?
That's a really good question, Rhonda. So what I would say to that is we're in the perfect time because everything has had to slow down. And some people are even trying to figure out, okay, do I have all of my systems in place? Do I really know what I'm doing? Because what I've learned oftentimes from entrepreneurs when I speak with them is that they had an idea or they had a need and they ran with it. But they really didn't take the time to stop and do the business plan. They think, well, why do I need a business plan? I'm not asking for a loan, because they associate a business plan with just getting a loan. And that's not true. It's a roadmap to also help you as you continue to navigate and especially when you're navigating through tough waters, and tough times. So I think what I would say is the way you can look internally is also by looking at, do you have all of the nuts and bolts in place for your business? Do you have the key things such as your business plan? Have you looked at your financials? Have you looked at your team? Whether you have employees or if you have consultants that you work with. But have you taken the time to really work all that through so that when you do hit a bump in the road, you can still navigate through that?
Okay, so I heard you say, is there some inventory that we have to do? And I'd like to just spend a minute kind of defining each. So
Yeah.
if we don't have a business plan, you're saying get one, pull one together. And
Yes.
there's plenty of resources that we've talked about on the show in previous episodes, and I'll link those down below to help people with that strategy, essentially is what you're saying. A strategy
Correct.
we're mapping out. So then, but talk a little more about that, about building that team, or what kind of assessment would we want to do with our team?
So again, Rhonda, what's really interesting right now in this period is people are either realizing what they did not have in place and that they need, or what they had and they really don't need. So for example, brick and mortar. Brick and mortar is not as important depending on what industry you're in and what type of service you're providing, as a lot of times people used to think. I remember when I started in business 27 years ago, there were things that people said, oh, you have to have this, or else you will not be taken serious. And one of them was a brick and mortar. And they would always say, don't use a P.O. box. You got to have a street address, or else you won't be taken serious. Well, it's just the opposite now today. People, so many people are working from home, either out of need, necessity, or convenience, And so what we used to think would not be acceptable is now acceptable. And then when it comes to your staff or your labor force, there are so many people that are qualified that you don't necessarily have to have as an employee, but have you sought them out? Have you figured out how to do that? And then depending on what type of business you're in, sometimes there's services like Upwork or something of that nature that provides, I would say, the auxiliary help that you could use to accomplish your goals.
Right. You'd find people that can help you fill the gaps in your business.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
without actually taking them on and having, you might not have enough work for a, 52-week work week, or work year, but you'd have enough for that one project-based thing and then move on to the next thing. So that's really good. So then one of the things that I hear you saying, so then if we're assessing that internal, that business, breadth of business, doing that assessment, what about capacity? So, you mentioned earlier on about the pivots and the changes and the agility that business owners are having. What would you recommend as far as capacity to make those types of moves?
So again, you need to be very clear about your limitations. If you don't understand that, you can get in over your head. And then you need to seek out people who are like-minded, who may be doing certain things that you're doing similar, so that you can build collaborations. And oftentimes, depending on what type of work you're doing, collaborations can be the answer. It can be exactly what you need. And then also, it may challenge you as you're dealing with capacity to say, hey, are you willing to grow? Are you willing to go to that next step or that next level in order to reach your maximum,
I want to ask you, because when I hear you say that, I think about all the things that I carry with me as an entrepreneur, right? And all these, I have this skill and this talent and that talent. Can you talk a little bit about putting one of those down to make room for that growth? Can you talk a little bit about that?
So I have a couple thoughts about that. One, because I feel like I'm in the same boat as you are oftentimes when I look back over my life and the different things I've done. And that is usually when you look at the people who have really been successful, they focused on one thing first. Yes. They really excelled at one thing first. And then once they were able to establish, corner that market or become successful or reach a certain level of fame in that area, then they could use that to go back and pick up some of the other things that they had an interest in. But it's almost like a jack of all trades and a master of none. If you have all these different gifts and skills and thoughts and ideas, but what are you doing? How will you really be successful? I do believe people can do multiple things, but maybe not all at the same time.
And I like the fact that you pointed that out, that not not all at the same time, but also what I hear you saying is that you have to create maybe one of them as a foundation, and then you use that and you leverage it and build on top of that to make the other ones even more successful. So instead
Correct.
of time being divided between 5 or 6 things, you have this foundational skill set or trade or product or service. And then on top of that, you build the other ancillary things, or some of those things may break off and become companies of their own that you can, have as well.
Right.
No, that's wonderful.
Yeah, oftentimes I was going to say, people who are real successful have started multiple companies, but then usually what happens is, like you said, they sell it off, they branch off or something, and then they still have their foundation of what they focus on.
Yes, I like that. And then you mentioned in one of your earlier comments, and I just wanted to hear a little bit more about this, is the community or the collaboration that you do. So are we sourcing those things from, well, now, I mean, how are we doing that? Because we don't have trade shows. We don't have, big conferences to, accidentally on purpose meet with people. So what's your recommendation now? And then I know that there are a few things that you actually host and do, if you don't mind sharing a couple of those things.
Sure, I don't mind at all. Thank you. I loved how you say accidentally on purpose on how we would run into each other at conferences or conventions. Yes. Well, believe it or not, with technology, it is still happening. I mean, there are people now who are beginning to roll out major conferences and conventions online. And you might think, oh my gosh, how could you ever connect? And you'd be surprised how you begin to navigate, just like you would navigate through a room or a convention hall in order to connect with that person. But what I would say is it's about doing your homework. It's about being prepared. So if you are wanting to collaborate with someone, whether it's to join forces and maybe go in on a deal together, or whether you want to source it out and give them a piece or they give you a piece, it's still about doing your homework and being prepared. And again, if you want to accidentally on purpose connect with someone online, again, do your homework and check it out to see who's already registered or who's planning to be there or who's the speaker. And I think it's actually easier now than when you're all in person, because people like to hide behind, technology or a screen or something like that. And if you know how to do it correctly and you're polite and kind, oftentimes people will accept you on LinkedIn or on a social media platform. Or if they're, a celebrity and you can't really get to them, usually you can follow them, versus and then navigate through that portal as well. So where there's a will, there's a way.
I call that their social avatar.
I like that.
It's that, the picture in the circle is their social avatar.
Yeah, so true. So true.
I'm actually really glad that you brought that up, because we are finding ourselves in a very less limited way to connect because of technology, essentially similar to you and I being on the show today. So
right.
I love that. So there's business assessment, making sure you have that plan and that strategy to navigate from. You said that there's networking and collaboration that you need to do, and to embrace the technology side of doing those things. And then also the capacity. So filling in the gaps and maybe resourcing from a different talent pool, if need be, to complement some of the growth opportunities that you'd like to pursue. Is there one thing that you would say is the most actionable thing that a business owner could do, like today? Like click subscribe on the video and then go do this one thing. What would that one thing be?
Don't be afraid of technology.
Okay.
And I say that because I do a show every Wednesday. It's called Wisdom Wednesdays with Coach Wendy on Instagram Live. And I had a young lady on today as my guest, and we called it Generational Love. And it was about the youngins and the elders. And she was a youngin, I was an elder. I'm a grandmother, so I'm an elder. And I don't run from that. I embrace it. But what we talked about is how oftentimes elders run from technology, and because it's not commonplace for us. But whereas for our children and some people's grandchildren, it's second nature. I have a 3-year-old grandson who has no fear with picking up my phone and doing whatever. And literally the other day, he knew how to take a picture, find it, and delete it if he didn't like it. Wow. And it's free. Great. And I was like, okay, I'm sorry you didn't like that. But the point being is they don't have fear. Whereas someone like me, I oftentimes had fear because I was scared I was going to mess something up, I was going to break it, or I was going to put something in the universe that I was like, oh my goodness. So for people who are really trying to navigate their business today,
Yes.
and especially older people, don't be afraid, because baby boomers, which is what I am, we're staying in the workforce a lot longer, which means we have to adapt. And part of that adapting is making sure that you are open. And then if you're not sure and you're scared, ask somebody. You
Right.
know, just ask somebody, say, could you help me?
And usually it's like you said, it's a grandson, it's a niece, it's a nephew. Yeah, I've had plenty of times where I just hand my phone to the back seat, like make this thing do what it's supposed to do. Well, I love
Yeah,
that. I love the resiliency and I love the support that you're giving the community, to women business owners
thank
specifically,
you.
but just overall, I've admired, been a huge fan of your work, for all of these years. So thank you
Thank you.
for trailblazing the way for generations like me to follow behind in your grace. And I appreciate you being on the show today, Wendy. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for reaching out,
Thank you.
because sometimes we don't even know what each other's doing until we reach out. So
That's the
thank you.
truth. So if people would like to join on the show, I would like you to tell them, I'll include it in the description box below, but will you share the best way to
Sure.
connect with you?
Yeah. Very easy. It's on my Instagram handle, which is just Wendy Gladney. And the show is at 12 noon every Wednesday, Pacific Standard Time, because now we have people joining in from all time zones. And we just drop little nuggets and wisdom each week to hopefully navigate your world. Today we focused a lot about voting. You know
Yes.
what's happening right now, and how we can help each other, and things that we sometimes miss. And I'm going to leave your show a little nugget today, because I think it's important that all of us use all of our platforms to make sure we encourage people to vote,
Very much so.
and to please go out and make sure you're registered, because if you've moved, or if you've gotten married and changed your name, or done any of those types of things, you may not be registered. So please register to vote.
Yes. And as a backup, find out where your polling place is.
Yes,
Really?
definitely. Definitely.
That's real. No, that's real. Thank you so much, Wendy. Thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure. Thank you.